On the panel, taking questions primarily about military engineering and the working environment, we're going to have today Major Angela Laycock, who is currently an OC of 502 STRE Force Protection Engineering in 170 Engineer Group. And commissioned in 2006 following attendance at Welbeck College, which is the Army Sixth Form College, and she was sponsored by the Army to study engineering at university, and she has followed our professionally qualified engineer scheme since she has been in the Corps. We've got Captain Maria Larson, who you've seen quite a bit of. Maria is a reservist, having served 9 years as a regular officer, and she's currently serving 101 Engineer Regiment, EOD and Search. We've got W2 RQMS Reed, who is our senior serving soldier in the Corps. She's about to take up an appointment as our very first female squadron sergeant major, and RQ Reed has served for 20 years in the Corps. Staff Sergeant Tris Hughes is a military engineer fitter by trade. She's currently serving as a troop staff sergeant at 21 Engineer Regiment, and she has 18 years of service. And then last but by absolute no means least, we've got Corporal Georgina Peters, who is a military engineer fitter in utilities and petroleum by trade, and she's currently serving at 3 Royal School of Military Engineering as an instructor. And Corporal Peters has 11 years service. So we've got a mix of rank, we've got a mix of experience. Maria, over to you.
I just want to start off with a question from someone who works in recruiting in the Sappers and the Reserves. And their question is, how can we better sell the Royal Engineers to potential candidates?
Mom, I'm happy to answer that question.
Perfect.
So what I would say is probably really concentrate on the trades that the women are interested in at the minute in the engineers. I would say the likes of geo, logistics, signals, and I think we need to just promote them trades, because that does seem to be what the ladies are interested in, the regulars. So I think if you looked at that for a start, then that would probably help.
Sure, and I'll just jump in on another perspective. So I actually work in recruiting for the Reserves as well, and I found sometimes when I've been at events, there are lots of people who just assume that engineering is not open to women. So I think a lot of the time at events, we just need to be ambassadors. And I found that sometimes I need to actively go and join into other groups just to say, look, you can come and talk to our stand over here as well. Because sometimes it's just a lack of knowledge, and it's an assumption because of the recent news that women are now allowed in all roles. Some people have just assumed that women haven't been allowed in engineers until within the last year. And that's just a misconception that's out there. So if you do work in recruiting, make sure that you, I would say, work the whole room, because people might not even know to come to you. And we've then had a couple of questions about Sandhurst, but I'm going to save those for the end as a group. One of the questions that we've had is, what kind of advice would you give to someone if you feel potentially that you're not being supported by the senior ranks or those who are in a higher position than you in the workplace?
I'm happy to take that one. If that question is from somebody within the Corps, that is exactly what the Sapper Servicewomen's Network is for. It is absolutely not to go over and above the chain of command. It is very much to support the chain of command. But the reason the network was set up was to give everyone across the ranks somewhere to go. Because we recognise that through past experiences, a lot of us have experienced a lot of things, both positive and negative. And whether you are a sapper coming to a major, a sapper going to a sapper, me going to a full colonel, or a full colonel reaching down to get advice from a corporal, that is exactly what the network is there for. So if you feel you're not being supported and you're within the Royal Engineers, please come to the Sapper Servicewomen's Network, and we will advise you the very, very best we can as to how to approach that situation and take it forward. We certainly won't solve it for you, and we will not encroach upon the chain of command, but you can guarantee someone on the network has experienced the problem that you're experiencing at the moment. If you are outside of the Corps, I'm so sorry, it's my mum trying to call. If you are outside of the Corps, I encourage you to find someone who you can trust. Find someone who you can trust and confide in, and ask them for advice. There are so many people out there that will give it, and I'm not saying that, you know, everything is hung up on our misconceptions, but sometimes it is. So find someone who you can trust and confide in them and ask for the advice.
Brilliant. And we've got a specific one to you actually, Vicky, from Sophie Longston, and she asks, one of the most fantastic things about the core of engineers is that it's broad and varied. We post every 2 years, but sometimes that means we don't quite get the depth of knowledge that we would like to achieve within those roles before then moving on to something different. So in your career, have you found that sometimes you've come full circle in certain areas, and how have you guarded yourself against that skill fade?
So I think it is a frustration, especially when you get into a job that you absolutely love. Because I think with all of us, we spend the first 6 months bedding in, you spend the first year making all the changes that you want to make. And then by the time you actually hit your second year, you're kind of running on full tilt, happily enforcing everything that you've changed. And then it's time to move on. And that can be a frustration. But I think do you come full tilt? I think you take the skills that you've learned throughout your career and you apply them in different areas. I think you learn from things that you've done the whole way along. So, you know, I often look back to mistakes I made as a troopie, experiences I had as an ops officer. I certainly reflect a lot on my subunit command. And also various different people that I've worked from, and the role model bit that I put in there about good and bad leaders and good and bad role models. I really, really do feel strongly about that, because I think you can just learn so much from these people. And I think as you go forward in your career and you do move from, you know, one job to something completely different, I think you just have to pull back on all those experiences and the skills that you've learned along the way, and have the confidence to use them, and just continue believing in yourself that you do have the experience.
Fab. And then we've got one about engagement burnout. So is there a way post-lockdown to make better use of virtual events? As we'll all be aware, we can end up with burnout based on the fact that there are so few women, like you say, the 165 out of almost 10,000. So how can we improve that in the future?
I'm happy to answer that one. I think, and this is my personal view, I think COVID-19 has launched the army forward into ways of working that has put us behind our civilian counterparts until now. I think being locked down and working from home has definitely had its challenges. I think there are probably lots of women and men out there who would quite happily say working from home without children would have been a bliss, or having children at home without work would have been bliss, but combining the two has at times been an absolute nightmare. But I do think moving forward, and I really hope it will change the way we can work, and I hope that employers will be more open to that. And what I mean by that is going forward, certainly what I would like to propose to my boss going forward is something like a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday working from the office, and a Thursday, Friday potentially working from home. For my personal opinion, that would change life significantly, because when you're in the work environment and you've got a break, you nip to Costa, or you nip over to a fellow squadron office to have a chat, and you have a little bit of downtime. I found when you're working from home, those breaks are used to do jobs. So you can put in a load of washing, you can prepare a meal, you can get on top of life. And what that then creates is, by the time you come to Friday, you have genuinely got a family weekend ahead of you, or a free weekend if you don't have a family. What you're not doing is catching up on the endless list of jobs that you have accumulated throughout the week. And I do think that that could create a change if the military embrace it. I think what would be a really huge shame is if we went completely back to the way we were working. And I think if we can embrace that, I think that will stop the burnout, because it just gives people can still work professionally and they can still produce their output. It just puts that work-life balance back into perspective. That is my personal view, though.
Brilliant. And we've had then a question about when you have turned up to a unit, and I think probably all of us on this panel have experienced this, and you are the only female, how easy has it been to fit in, and what kind of challenges have you had to overcome? Now, I'll say my personal one. The first time I even realised I was the only female was when my hairband snapped, and I looked around. There's no one I can borrow one from. That was the first time I even realised I was the first female. But for the rest of the panel, what kind of challenges did you have to overcome?
I think this is a good one for Corporal Peter's mum.
Perfect.
Hi, yeah, I've always found a lot of my postings, I've been the only female, and it can be lonely and it can be hard. As Major Warrington said earlier, this network is fantastic. I've met so many people through this that I can speak to, so I'm never completely on my own. But I think you get out of it as much as you put in. So the guys on camp are all happy to be your friend if you put yourself out there and make friends. If you choose to lock yourself in your room on an evening and not socialise, then it's going to be even harder. But no, I don't think it's hard to make friends. I don't think it's hard being the only female. It is just things like when your bubble snaps, you've got no one to lend one off. But no, I think you get out what you put in. So just make friends with the guys, put yourself out there, and you'll be
fine. Brilliant. Anything from anyone else on the panel before we go to the next question?
Just one from me, Mum. I think I was a fifth girl to join the engineers, and it was really difficult back then, I'll be honest. But I think we've evolved so much as an organisation now, and I think it's the norm to see females within squadrons and regiments. And I think as we go along, it's just going to get even better. So I just wanted to add that as well.
Okay, then we've got some. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I just noticed before I got kicked out and back in again that there was a question from Charlotte about professionally qualified engineers. Do you want me to answer that quickly?
Yep, go for it.
Okay, so Charlotte asked whether my experience within the engineers was transferable to Civvy Street, effectively, and I'd say it most definitely is. So I did the professional engineer course, we call it the PQE, professionally qualified engineer course, through the Royal Engineers. So you normally do it as a captain, and some people do it as a major, having done your sort of junior officer part. And it's a 2-year course where you spend 6 months back at Chatham doing an MSc in military engineering. Then you go on a building site for a civilian attachment for a year, where you're just treated as a normal section engineer. And I was on the Battersea Power Station redevelopment project, and that's designed to gain you the experience that you need to apply for your chartership. You then spend 6 months in a design office learning about the technical design side of things before going back to Chatham to sit your chartered professional review, either with the Institution of Civil Engineers or IMechE or IET, depending on which flavour you became, whether it was civil like me or mechanical and electrical. And then you end up getting your chartership. So out of that 2-year course, which only comes with a 3-year return of service, I ended up with an MSc and my CEng out of it. And I'm really using it at the moment. So I now specialise in force protection engineering. So we work quite a lot with a lot of the civilian agencies looking at physical security for buildings. And I've used it most recently in the military aid to civilian authority or civil authorities on the Toddbrook Reservoir collapse, where I was sent up there as an advisor. And even though we had all these, I was sent up as our geotechnical engineering advisor, I was a very good generalist engineer that could look at military support and very practical solutions and let the real damn experts look at that side of things. And also most recently for the COVID-19, people in my team were involved in a lot of the Nightingale Hospital setups and also the pop-up testing side of things. So all those people have got their qualifications through the engineers, and they're now using that to help civil authorities. So yes, it very much does. And if you're interested in that, then I would say look online at the professional engineer training side of things, because it's an awesome avenue to go down if you're technically minded.
Brilliant, thanks for that, Ange. We've had quite a few Sandhurst questions. Firstly, I want to say good luck to those of you who are starting shortly. Good luck to those of you that are going to AOSB. It is quite the journey. So some of the questions that we've had, one is about whether people think that they might be disadvantaged if they don't have an engineering background with regards to trying to join the Royal Engineers?
I am totally happy to take this.
Go
So just to give you a tiny little bit of background on me, I have got a sports science degree from Brunel University. Yes. And I came with absolutely no engineering background whatsoever. It is not required. The thing that I loved about the engineers when I was going through Sandhurst was, and I'll be completely honest, I was completely toyed between the sappers and the gunners. Please don't hate me for that. But my OC at the time at Sandhurst was a gunner, and I remember going into him distinctively and saying, I'm stuck, I don't know what to choose. And he was very good, and he said to me, put yourself in the middle of the desert with your troop and nothing else. What would you want to be doing? And that made the answer so easy for me, because I personally thought that with the engineers, it doesn't matter what you're doing, whether you're training, whether you're on operations, whatever you do, you always have something to look at, because you've either built something, you've either blown something up, you've made a difference to someone's life. And that to me was really fulfilling. So I chose the Royal Engineers because of that. And I had a slight panic before I went to my troop commander's course, because I felt my own misconception that I was absolutely rubbish at maths. And I did have a panic. But the training that is delivered at Chatham when you go through your troop commander's course is absolutely first class. And the fact at the end of it, I could design bridges, albeit they were a little bit wonky, but largely design bridges and do basic construction engineering was really quite something. And definitely it wasn't my strength, but the Corps obviously saw something, because then for the first 2 years of my career, I did nothing but construction engineering. And I learned very much on the job, and that was fantastic. So you absolutely don't need an engineering background. Please don't be put off by that. If you do have an engineering background, clearly it is advantageous because you'll understand things. But I will be completely honest, when I compare myself to my peers who have engineering degrees, in some cases I have used my degree on a daily basis far more, because every soldier needs to be fit. Lots of soldiers get injured. Everybody needs to know about health and nutrition, and that is part of everyday life. So no, you do not need an engineering background.
I'd just like to echo what Vicky said there. I'm also, I don't have a degree in engineering. For me, the key point of when I started in the Sappers, so I was actually in the reserves at university before I then went regular. For me, you're not the SME anyway. So unless you're a chartered engineer, unless you go up that very specific route, you aren't the specialist. You have people who are specialists in whatever that trade might be. And for me, I've always approached that as, well, it's a team effort. So if I have an issue with how I'm going to use a piece of carpentry work with regards to building something that I've been tasked with, well, I'm project managing that. So the specialist will always be on site. And as long as you all listen to each other, and I think what Vicky was saying earlier about a lot of the time a female trade is to be a little bit more collegiate, actually that's worked hugely in my favour, because I've not tried to be the SME when I'm not. We've got a couple more Sandhurst questions. Someone asks how difficult Sandhurst is, and I think that's been debated a little bit in the chat. But more specifically, how could someone engage with specific leadership practices beforehand, or potentially show some of their leadership skills when it comes to preparing for Sandhurst, or indeed trying to succeed at Sandhurst?
So I would say if you are the kind of person that has applied to go through AOSB, there is something about leadership that has appealed to you because you have actively applied to be a leader in the British Army. When you go through AOSB, that will be tested. And my advice to you is be yourself. Absolutely be yourself. And that is what you must remain to be through Sandhurst. Yes, of course, there are things you can do. You can read books, you can, you know, if you're in cadets, you can do more leaderless tasks, you can practice your command tasks and your leadership ability. But everything that you need to know outside of natural leadership ability will be given to you in your training. You're going to spend a year at the Royal Military Academy of Sandhurst, and there is no better, in my opinion, leadership training in the world. So from the start of your journey through AOSB and on to Sandhurst, just remain true to yourself, be yourself, and be the natural leader that is within you.
And then I think in general, for those who are starting at Sandhurst, you will have done some leadership at some point before you start Sandhurst. So be self-critical, self-evaluate, see how you can improve, and then try to harness that before you go, and just be open when you're there. What Vicky was saying earlier about don't take things personally. If someone's looking to give you constructive criticism about how to improve, that's an attempt to show you that compassion and to develop you. It's not an attack. Okay, so the question's now flying in thick and fast. So do you think that there's a disadvantage if you don't do cadets because it wasn't available?
No, absolutely not. I think cadets and University Officer Training Corps are fantastic stepping stones, and they are a great aid to recruitment as well. They develop young people in very special ways. They give you the attributes you need in order to move forward in life, not just into the army. And I am a really big advocate for those two organisations. However, if you haven't done it, you are absolutely not at a disadvantage. And I go back to everything else that I said. Everything that you need, you will be taught. And if I do go back to, if you are that way inclined, you definitely have a bit of natural leadership or something in you that's making you want to be a leader. So please don't worry if you haven't done cadets. If anybody else from the panel wants to chip in, please do.
It's the same as a soldier. I remember when I went to basic training and we had to strip a weapon. That was one of the first things that we did. Well, we got taught to do, and all the cadets knew how to do it. But you catch up so quickly, and then once you do it, you remember it for the rest of your life. So definitely don't worry if you haven't been to the cadets. Great if you have, but yeah, definitely nothing to worry about if you haven't.
Yeah, Vicky, I'd echo that, because I was an Army cadet first, then went to Welbeck. Then we did a couple of weeks on the pre-university commissioning course at Sandhurst, and my report from that said that I'm already green and Army enough. I should go to uni, get a decent degree, do sport, keep yourself fit, and go to Sandhurst fresh and willing to learn, rather than people that had gone through the Shrivenham side of things and stayed together. So I went to Sandhurst having not done anything really that green for quite a few years. Yes, I could remember map reading and which way round to hold a rifle from Army cadets, and I could march, so it meant that I could switch off slightly on some of those lessons. But yeah, going fresh and willing to learn and actually taking on what the colour sergeants and everybody says at Sandhurst, I think is the key point. Rather than being the know-it-all that's done it through most of their university life.
Perfect.
Brilliant, thank you. Someone's then specifically asked if it's difficult as a woman to start in EOD. I hope you don't mind, I'll just pick that one up. In EOD and search, a lot of the times the pattern that we see is that the teams are a lot smaller. I would say that it's less about gender and whether you're better suited to working in smaller teams. Because actually a lot of the time, if you've got that strong cohort of a small team that's out either doing EOD or doing search, it's that bond as a team. So that's the environment that you're looking for more than your specific gender. I think sometimes actually it might be slightly easier. Now I come from a reservist perspective, because EOD and search has had reserves integrated for quite some time. So having that diversity, and I mean cognitive diversity, because you have people who both have a civilian trade and their military trade, actually really helps build up those teams. So it's less evident, I would say. Also, the general ratio of females within EOD and search compared to the rest of the Royal Engineers has often been a little bit higher. So it's the highest in GEO, then it's EOD and search, and then the rest of the trades. So I wouldn't say at all that there is in my experience, a female element to EOD and search. And then we've got a question, RQ, I'm not sure who wants to pick this one up. How could someone make links with the Corps before starting that military career, other than simply organised events?
I think probably, I mean, social media for starters, for the likes of Sapper Servicewomen's network, I think that's a really good source of being able to pick up information and sort of get a feel for what the cores are like. Maybe Staff Hughes can jump in as well and have an opportunity to give her opinion.
If not, I don't mind jumping in on just one little bit of advice I'd have. Like many engineers out there, I'm a bit of a nerd. So I did a lot of reading beforehand. I went to the Core Museum. I wanted to understand the background, the history, the heritage of the CAT badge that I was joining. So for me, when I went to the regimental selection boards at Sandhurst, and I had that background knowledge, it not only made me feel more confident, but it also showed that I had that interest. So whatever it is you're going for, whatever rank you're trying to start at, actually just having that general interest, as you would do for any job and do any preparation, I personally found that helped me quite a lot. And the Core Museum's hopefully going to be open soon after COVID slows down. We've then had a couple of questions about sport. RQ, I know you'll be interested on one side and I'll be interested on the other. Someone is asking about how to get involved in sports as a RE officer, particularly netball or rowing. So RQ does Army netball and I do Army rowing. So RQ, do you want to kick off?
I don't do Army netball, but I do Royal Engineers netball, which I'm very passionate about. So yeah, I could be here for the rest of the afternoon. I promise I won't be. So basically, just speak to your chain of command. We've got the Sapper Servicewomen Sports Facebook page, and we've also got the Facebook netball page. So I would definitely get involved on there, express an interest, and we're always looking for players. So yeah, just let us know, and you're more than welcome to attend the training camps that we do. And then we also have the intercores that take place in usually October time. Not sure if they're going to go ahead this year, but I'm sure they will be next year. So yeah, definitely just get in touch. But the Sapper Servicewomen Sports page on Facebook is really good. You find out about everything that's going on in the Corps. So yeah, definitely get on there, and if not, just contact me direct and I can point you in the right direction.
And if I can just jump in, anyone that is out there that's thinking about joining the Corps and has questions about sport, don't be put off by our small numbers. Although we're a very large Corps, it has traditionally been very difficult to raise a female team. We've been we've done hugely well with netball, and that's been led by RQ Reid, and we've done very, very well in other sports. And in the sports where we don't have enough women, such as hockey, we basically marry up with some of the smaller corps to make a small corps team. So we're still absolutely represented. You can play any sport and be involved in any sport you want through the Corps. There is always a way.
Hi Mom, yeah, can I add on to that as well, please? I've had really, really good opportunity for sport within the Corps. So I played for the Corps team for football. Regimental wise, we've done some really good football tours, and most recently myself and Major Laycock are representing the Army now for mountain biking. So yeah, really, really good opportunity for sports out there.
Yeah, and I'll do a quick plug on the rowing front. I think in general, when it comes to being in the Sappers as a female, we are often, and I'm going to generalise here, very motivated, very determined, and our mindset is also akin to doing a lot of sport. So a lot of the time you will have females within the engineers who are also either on a Corps team or on an Army team. Within Army rowing, we are super inclusive. If anyone's had a bit of experience in it, we will keenly try to develop you to get you into the senior squad. And if you've never tried it before, we do 1 week intensive learning courses to try and get some more novices on board as well. So any sport you're interested in, I think my first advice, if you're not already in the Corps, is simply to search on Facebook. If you are, you'll be able to find all those lists through the REHQ website of who is actually on what committees. But if not, social media is probably the easiest way to get hold of people on a direct stream. And then we've got a very specific question here. And I think you're probably the most appropriate to pick this one up. A PhD student in material science and engineering wants to know what kind of opportunities would be available to them within the military.
So you're probably more qualified than most of the qualified engineers within the military with that side of things. So yeah, it depends on what you want to do, really. You could either go through Sandhurst, the very normal route, do your junior troop command, that side of thing, and do what we would class as a normal combat engineering side of things. Then you could specialise like I've done and go down the professional engineering route. Or something that I think would actually utilise your skills a little bit more is becoming a reservist. So in 170 Engineer Group, we're a national reserve unit where we select our reservists based on some of their civilian qualifications. So we have people that specialise in like ports, rail, critical national infrastructure, force protection engineering, and they actually utilise their day job as part of their expertise to become a reservist within 170 Engineer Group. So that's possibly a way to look into using that if you don't want to go and do the normal junior officer route. So hopefully that answers that question.
Brilliant, thanks, Ange. We've then had a reservist ask about how they can get more involved in sport, because actually work commitments and travel commitments can be quite significant, especially for a reservist. I understand the pain of this one quite a lot, especially when you often end up travelling. You don't get paid for that travelling time, you lose out on your normal wages from your civilian job, and a lot of the time you can't use RSDs for training if it's not for a specific event or if you're not part of a specific team. So it can be quite hard to sometimes break in. Personally, for me, I would say if you are a reservist, your first point of call is simply to speak to your chain of command. You might find that actually your chain of command are very supportive in a way that you hadn't expected them to be. My chain of command are incredibly supportive of me with Army Rowing. And give me a lot of opportunities to make sure that I can be involved on a coaching side and do other elements that I didn't potentially think myself were possible. So first I would say, ask the question, speak to your chain of command first, because there may be an opportunity that you're not even aware of. And secondly, I'd say you can engage with those sports teams without necessarily being physically present. So by engaging on that social media, perhaps reaching out to some of the team captains of whatever that sport might be, whether it's at unit level, whether it's at corps level or army level, a lot of the time, all of us are really keen to build our own sports because we want a bigger pool so that we get a higher standard. So I would say engage on those platforms first. Has anyone else got anything to add about how the reservists could be more engaged with sport?
Some of the sports are doing virtual sports, so I've just been involved in the road racing E-series, which is hosted on Zwift. Every Wednesday there's a race, and every Tuesday night there's a UK Armed Forces road race as well. And I've now become a bit of an addict, even though it's really nice and sunny outside. I'm there sweating on my turbo trainer, watching my little avatar that I wore mountain cam to go up Alpe de Zwift last week. So yeah, look out for some of those, and it's all over the Facebook. So if there's a specific sport, have a look at British Army like cycling, and you'll probably be able to find something that we managed to conjure up to keep us entertained during lockdown.
Brilliant. Right, I think we've covered quite a lot on sport there, and I can see if you go through the chat, for those of you who are interested, there's also quite a few plugs. So if you are interested in getting involved, just have a look on there and see how certain people are already trying to see if we can get more engagement. Vicky, then one specifically for you. Someone is asking for a bit of advice based off your experience with having a family. So how would you deal with some of those situations when you feel potentially that you're putting yourself first and focusing on your own goals and career progressions whilst trying to balance a family?
So I'm going to be completely honest. Having a family was a game changer for me in terms of my career. And again, this is all my personal opinion. If I went back 8 years, I was aspiring absolutely to be that first female CEO, and My PPPs and my posting preference performers still very, very much said, send me anywhere in the world, you know, I'm happy to do back-to-back tours, etc., etc. You then pop out a small human being and you do find that things change, and that is, it's not the military's fault, it is my fault. That's biology. And as a mum, you suddenly find that the thought of a 6-month tour isn't as exciting as it used to be, because you're suddenly presented with the fact you're going to leave that small human being behind and miss out on 6 months of their life. But that's not to say I clearly wouldn't do it. But the only thing that I would say, and this again is very much my personal opinion, there had to come a point in my career where I did feel I had to make a choice as to whether I was going to continue on that trajectory of punching for the top end jobs, continuing the way I was going, or potentially make a choice to take the kind of jobs where I could balance my career and my family. And professionally, that is possibly one of the hardest decisions I have ever had to make. And I'll be completely honest, it really was. I got selected for the subunit command that I wanted, which was up in Yorkshire, and very quickly realised, and this goes back to having a dual serving family, when my husband was posted to Aldershot the week after and I had a baby that was less than 1 in the mix, something had to give. And my choice, and I was lucky that it came up, was to take a training squadron instead of what I call a fighting squadron. Do I regret it? Absolutely not. I had the most amazing time being OC of 5-7 training squadron. But at that point, I feel that I made a choice in my career. Has it affected me? I don't know, and I will never know. I have now selected to Lieutenant Colonel and I start my staff training in September. So my career has continued. I think probably, if I'm honest to myself, it's just continued probably slightly slower than it would have. Does it mean I can still reach my goals of command and things like that? Yes, absolutely I can. But again, do I want to command 2 engineer regiments and be incredibly busy and away the whole time? Or do I want command of a regiment that I can possibly balance with my family? And they're the kind of decisions that I find that I now need to make. So yes, there are decisions to be made. Can you balance it? Yes. Is it hard work? My goodness, yes, it is absolutely hard work. But I watched a TED presentation yesterday by Sheila Sandberg, who is the Chief Operating Officer for Facebook, and she gives a brilliant presentation on not leaving before you leave. And by that, she talks a lot about how women often make the decision to have children, and at the same time, subconsciously, they make the decision to leave their career before they've even had children, sometimes before they've even got married. It's just a thought process they go through. And what she says very clearly is, own the decisions that you make. And if your decision is to take a different path, just keep going at 100% until the point that you do decide to leave. And I would echo that. So yes, there are difficult decisions to be made. Yes, you can absolutely balance it. And yes, it is definitely a challenge.
Brilliant. Someone's then asked about the way up between joining the OTC at university versus joining the reserves. I'll briefly give my take before handing over to Vicky. I decided to join the reserves because I wanted what I felt like at the time was a role that was more focused on training and less focused on the AT and the social events that I felt were a bit of a highlight at the OTC at my university at the time. I think that's probably changed a bit in the last 12, 13 years. So for me, joining the reserves, I joined as a sapper. I was an army bursar, so I knew that I would be joining Sandhurst as a regular officer as soon as I finished university. So those 3 years, having the experience as a sapper, albeit as a reservist one, I felt actually that really equipped me to be a better leader in the future. I felt I understood a little bit more, even if it's just a small segment, about how that lived experience is for the sapper joining. So for me, that was my focus. But I think the OTC probably, I imagine, gives you a slightly better preparation in general for starting Sandhurst. I didn't, for example, have any practice planning exercises. I wasn't surrounded by other people who also wanted to be officers. So that experience was quite different. I don't know, Vicky, if you've got any points to add.
So I'll be completely honest, when I started university, I had made a conscious decision not to go to the UOTC because I had been a cadet since I was 12 unofficially, 13 officially, and I went the whole way through to when I was 18, and I was a little bit armied out, but I had had the most amazing experience with cadets, and I just felt I needed to experience something new, knowing that I always wanted to go in the army as a career. However, I then got to my freshers fair and there was this massive poster that said £28.50 a day, and I was like, I'm in. So signed up straight away, and as I said, had an amazing 3 years. The OTC, what I would say now though, is very different to when I went through, oh God, nearly 20 years ago. In fact, it might even be longer than that. But anyway, it's very different now. It's very structured. You come away with a bunch of qualifications. It is training heavy, but you still have a lot of fun. And there are so many opportunities out there for things like sport, adventurous training, and various other things. There is the bonus that you do get paid. You have your travel allowances paid for. And you do, in the same way as the reserves, get a bonus as well. So I think whichever option you take, they are both very, very good. If you are thinking about going to Sandhurst, certainly the preparation that you will get from UOTC, I would argue outweighs what you would get from a reserve unit, because the UOTC is set up to take you through those stepping stones to AOSB and beyond.
Brilliant. And then we've got a question about any advice that someone might offer for someone who's thinking about commissioning from the ranks. I don't know whether this is a commission where you go in as a DE or an LE, RQ. I don't know if you want to potentially take that one.
Sorry, can you just say that again, Mum? I was reading the chat question.
That's quite all right. So we've got someone asking about what advice you might get or give if you wanted to make the transition from being an OR to being an officer.
I would probably say just get as much information as you can from the officers in your squadron. I know that there was a really good answer from Lieutenant Colonel Brown. He put something on the chat to answer Sapper Doyle on that. So yeah, I would definitely just get as much information as you can, find out exactly what you want to transfer to, whether, you know, if she wants to stay in the engineers or whether she wants to go to something else, or hopefully she would want to stay in the engineers. Yeah, definitely that, to be honest with you. I'm just trying to find Lieutenant Colonel Brown's response, because it was really good for her. I can't find it.
I can do it verbally if you want.
Please, sir.
I was just saying that your CO's recommendation will count for an awful lot more than 3 days at AOSB. You know, your CO will have seen you probably for 2 years before they recommend you to go for commissioning, and therefore, if they say that, the Corps Colonel, when he or she comes to look at you for selection, will consider a CO's view far more seriously than anything else. I know, having written a few up in that position in the past.
Thanks, sir.
Thanks everyone for all that information. There's an awful lot of questions, and we've got a few that are left unanswered, but some are touching on things that we've already covered. So some of those will potentially save either for the Sapper Servicewomen's Network event that will be held towards the tail end of the year, or we'll seek to add a couple of notes when we post this video on the Facebook page and wider.